Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Technocratic Podcast. Today, our guest is Norm Crandall, VP of Technology at Corpay. Norm is a friend and colleague. He's been leading engineering teams across a number of different verticals, including FinTech, EdTech, and more. Norm also spent a number of years in the military as an interpreter, so if you need any lessons on how to speak Russian, let him know. I met Norm during an exit process we were working on together, which turned out to be very successful. And I was always impressed by his work ethic and focus on high output engineering. I'm super glad that he's been able to join us today. Welcome to the podcast, Norm. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Bobby. It's great to be talking to you again.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining. And as always, I'm going to turn it over to my trusty sidekick, Mishka McCowan. He'll dig into some fun get to know you questions to get us warmed up. Take it away, Mishka.
Hey, Norm, nice to meet you. I have for you 8 questions, and the first 7 are very simple, just getting to know you questions, and the 8th one that's going to be the kicker. So hold on, and let's dig into this. First one is, what is your favorite word?
Favorite word?
Favorite word?
Ownership.
Okay. What is your least favorite word?
It's actually a couple words, not my job.
Okay, that works. What sound or noise do you love?
The sound of a French horn in a classical symphony.
Nice.
That's great.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Honking horns in Hyderabad.
What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
I think being a barista is what I would like to do in retirement, so I'd say a barista.
Okay.
Coffee guy.
What profession would you never like to attempt?
Anything in the medical field.
And question number 7, what is your favorite curse word?
Scheiße.
Good. Spoken like a true German.
All right. Yeah. And for the bonus question number 8, what is your favorite shirt? Given that you have this lovely piece of art you've got on, and I know you're somewhat renowned for your shirts. What is your favorite one?
So I think my favorite one, and everyone knows when I wear it, is my Yoga Zen goat. It generally means the day before was a rough day, and today I'm trying to be calmer.
I've seen that one before, Norm.
Right.
For sure. The goat shirt. The funny shirt, man.
Cool.
Norm, when did you start this whole thing of unique shirts?
So about 2 years ago, I guess. I just kind of, I was a bowler for a long time. I kind of stopped during COVID, and since then, I really haven't gotten back to it. But I just really started liking bowling shirts, and so I took on just kind of looking across, and as I see new designs, I go, man, that one's nice. That one's nice. I think I'm up to 70 shirts in the closet now.
Wow.
10 are probably not safe for work.
Dude, that's nuts.
The other 60 are safe for work, but it's just see a nice design, grab it. One for almost every holiday as well.
Right.
Yep.
That's so funny, Norm. One of my first jobs in high school was designing the website of a company that did bowling shirts, that made bowling shirts. So they would just have, their office would just be piles of shirts, and it was a very colorful assortment of shirts for sure. Very unique, very different. And I guess that's a bowling shirt right there, maybe, kind of.
It is this is yep. I mean, this is a bowling shirt for the design. I call them bowling shirts or Charlie Sheen shirts. Like it's the Charlie Sheen shirt from 2.5 Men as well, right? Same kind of thing. They just have different designs. His were a little more. I would say his were a little more bland. So
okay, got it. That's cool. Mishka, did you have anything else for Norm?
No, that was the end of our hit parade.
Nice. Norm, so I'm going to throw an easy one out there for you just to get our listeners some color commentary on your background. You went from being a Russian interpreter to being a software engineer. How did that happen? I've always been super curious about that.
So I think we have to go way, way back to the time of a Texas Sinclair 4K computer that my parents bought me way back when. And an old Atari 800 XL computer. And that's where I kind of started my like love affair with like being able to write code, and just being able to make a computer do what it wanted to. Then kind of had the IBM PC Junior, right way back, and I really actually wrote software before the military. I worked for an education company writing software when I was 16, back in the day for an Apple IIe. And I
Oh,
wrote some
wow.
software for our school district back in Turbo
Yeah.
Pascal back in the day as
Right.
well when I was in high school with my basically computer teacher then. But then I kind of was a foreign exchange student for a year, came back and said, I like this language thing, and went and said, hey,
Mhm.
do you got something for me? And was going to do 4 years in the military as a Russian interpreter. Loved it so much, stayed 20 years, and retired, I guess now 16 years ago, and said, I'm done with that life. It's time to go do what I really wanted to do, and just kind of exited
Yeah.
and was able to. Um, had an advantage. I came out of the military with a security clearance, which and the aptitude in computers, which if you
Yeah.
retire in Northern Virginia, it's hard not to
Great
find a
combo.
job.
Yeah.
So
Right.
and did that, and then kind of dropped into the private sector because I got kind of tired of the government working contract work. So that's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
the
That's a cool
path I
story, Norm.
took, which is just a
Yeah.
little different than most. So
hmm Yeah, a little different than most, but like you've been doing programming since you were a kid. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
Um, Norm, one of the things that when we used to work together, we would always talk about is getting the most out of engineering teams. How do you manage them in a way that like leads to really high performance and all that? And we talked so much about metrics, and we talked about like the culture part of it. And we talked about, how do you deal with tough employee situations, all of that. Since you got into managing people a while back, and not just being a developer, but actually managing a group of people, what are some of the things that you sort of learned as the tricks of the trade? Like, when you, for example, me and you worked on a project where we started up a team offshore, and, it took a while to hire them. But in a situation like that, when you have a brand new team, for example, what are some of the ways that you should do or use to get that team from being brand new to get them to a certain level? Like, what are some tips for that?
sure. I think number one, it's sitting down and making sure they understand the business. Um, Writing software to me is the easy part of the job. It's
Yeah.
understanding the business and what we're writing the software for, who the customer is. That's the hard part of the job. I think you can hire people to be what I call widget makers, right? Here's a Jira ticket, go write this code. Um,
Right.
it's hard to get people to a level where they have empathy for the customer. They know what the
Mm.
customer needs, and they question what we're building to make sure we are building the right things. And I think that takes time of just leadership working with them in the beginning,
Mhm.
explaining the why, right? Why do
Mhm.
we exist as a company? Why are we
Right.
building the thing we build? What does the customer use it for? And the more you have that conversation with, that new team or even that new person, um, the coding comes natural, right? Even
Yeah.
the most junior software engineer in my mind, their skill set will grow. But if they
Mhm.
never dig into the business, they're just a coder. So to me, there's a
Yeah.
difference between the coder and the software engineer, right? The coder is, I
Right.
got a ticket, go write me some code. The software engineer is the thinker who knows what, listens to product, works with product, and actually is
Mm.
developing the things that the business needs to keep growing and that the customers want. So I think it's
Right.
really spending the early days, the first 30, 60, 90 days with that new team or that new person and giving them a roadmap of where they need to be at 90 days. Right.
Mhm.
I think that's what has to happen. But I think that's even for myself, joining new teams or new companies is like give yourself a 30, 60, 90 day. What are you
Yeah.
going to do because it's the same thing. I'm brand new. I have to learn that domain as well. So I give myself a 30, 60, 90-day kind of roadmap of where I want to be at
That's
90
interesting.
days. So,
Yeah. The thing about customer empathy is a huge deal, I feel like. That's such a good point because anytime you put an engineer, it seems like, in front of a customer for the first time, they learn so much. It completely changes their mentality. They come back and they look at the product in a completely different way, and all of their output just changes for the better almost every time you do
mhm.
that. Um, that's a great tip for new teams. What about, so like you heard about storming, norming,
Yeah.
performing, whatever that framework is. Um, how do you get a new team, in your experience, to go from just barely knowing each other's name to like 90 days later being a pretty well-oiled machine? One obviously is get them to understand the business, get them to
Yeah.
understand the customer. What else can you do as a leader to make that happen faster?
Sure. I think you have to, it's, it's not all about work. Some of it is also about just the interactions of the team, right?
Yeah,
The scrum master has kind of disappeared across some organizations, quite a few, right?
yeah,
It's one of these. But
hmm,
if you think what that scrum master used to do, they were the ones that took that team and did the things that weren't just writing code. They did the
yeah,
retro. And I'm a big person that says a retro shouldn't be a congratulatory retro. Sometimes you have to have hard conversations. And
right,
even though you're having hard conversations, I think it forms a team when people start trusting one another that what they're saying is honest and they're being transparent with one another and they're questioning and they're saying, hey, I'm not sure if you pulled your weight, but if you didn't, why didn't you? Is there something we can do to help you the next time? Right. And
yeah,
so I think that Scrum Master role that's gone away that used to do that on teams becomes the team lead's responsibility or the
right,
engineering manager's responsibility to get the team together to start functioning as a group. Um,
yeah.
I think
Can
there's a
you
great book.
force?
What was that?
Yeah, yeah, no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I think there's a great book out there called The Team That Managed Itself, right? That
Hmm,
everybody should read because it's a really good book about how, a an engineering manager or a leader needs to work with the team so that that leader can actually take a step back and that team starts working as one and you get rid of all the infighting and but the ideas are shared.
yeah,
So I generally buy that book for almost everyone that's ever under me.
yeah.
So
That's a smart thing. Tell our viewers again the name and the author, or just even if you know the name.
the team that managed itself, I think it's Christina Vodka, I think's how you say her name. If you
Okay,
just look
okay,
up the team that managed itself, you'll find the book.
cool,
So it's an older
cool.
book, but a
That's
really
a great
good book.
tip.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's up to the leader to take a new team and kind of force heads together, get people together, make sure that people are talking, create the sort of trigger for the relationships to start getting formed. Some people don't believe this. Some people more are like, oh, it's bottoms up. It just has to happen naturally. I'm not a huge believer. That's just bottoms up. I think you got both things have to happen, kind of. So chemistry has to be created. They have to have empathy for the customer needs and all of that. What about this aspect of like how much time do you give a brand new engineering team before they should hit like peak sustained performance? Is that like, because one of my friends was posted online, he was talking about sales people, and he said he's a really successful sales leader, and he was like, I'll give somebody like 14 days to show me they're a good salesperson, and then after that they're gone. And we in engineering so don't have that mentality. We just, you might, I know CTOs who have hired who spent a year trying to see if somebody was good or not. Where do you fall on that spectrum? How long should it take a team or a developer to get up to sustainable performance?
Sure. I think an individual, in my mind, should be somewhere self sufficient around the 90-day mark. That's kind of
Okay.
my thought process. A team is different, though. A team is a group of
Mm,
people that have to operate as one, right? I think that's a kind of you. between the 90 and 180 day, but I think a lot depends on the domain you're putting them in as well, right?
Yeah.
There are simple domains at 90 days they should all be able to operate in. And then there's more
Right.
complex regulated domains where there's so many things to understand that it goes beyond that 90 days before they're actually 100, really, really rolling along.
Yeah.
Again, they're not being stifled because of their skill set normally. They're being stifled because they don't understand all the regulations or business rules that go along with the business.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's not necessarily their fault. That's probably a leader's fault for not getting in there and getting that. But I think that I'd say it depends. I think individuals, though, at 90 days, especially your mid and senior level, the 90-day mark is where I think they've had enough time to look at the code, understand the business, understand the domain, where they should really start being able to really
Yeah.
provide a lot of benefit
Yeah.
to the company.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I also think it's like, if you have somebody who's a senior software engineer, so we're not talking mids or juniors,
Right.
and you bring them in, like, depending on the complexity of your platform, you should expect a lot out of a senior software engineer in terms of like ramp up speed. Like if it's a relatively straightforward platform, he or she's seen it before, there's no cultural barriers, other kinds of barriers, like even 45 days to like learn it and start executing on new development work. Like, I don't think it's too crazy to expect.
I can get behind that. That
Yeah,
sounds about right.
I think our industry has gotten too soft. I think what happens is we just sit there and see so many people, developers who are actually hurt by this because they're sitting there for upwards of a year, just, kind of languishing, doing random things, not really becoming their best potential selves. And because the leader is like, oh, I'm going to keep coaching them and somehow they're going to turn out to be good and stuff like that. I like the sales ethos most, which is, you have a certain period of time, either you're going to deliver or you're not. And if you create a good sort of threshold for that delivery, the CTO or the VP or the manager should be able to figure out, okay, is this person going to be a long-term fit over here or not? Okay. So that was really good. Here's a question for you, just side note to that kind of. When, as a leader, you join a business, and you're at that VP level, the way you are, right? How long should you give yourself to have like peak efficacy in that role? Because obviously, as a VP, you're managing so many people. You have to meet and get to know them. Then you've got the technical side. You have to worry about so many aspects of vendors. I mean, just 101 different things versus an individual contributor that may just have a very like laser focused path. How much time should you give yourself to get, impactful on the business as a VP?
For me, I think I set a goal of 90 days, right? There's a lot of things that have to happen at a VP level of, just the meet and greets, the who's who in the company,
Right.
like who's
Yeah.
responsible for what. And so that takes time to do, right? And now,
Yeah.
depending on how large the organization, I want to meet everyone and have a great one-on-one with everybody under me, not just my first level. I want to know
Right.
where they're at and what they're doing. And, the first 90 days to me is that time period where you're setting yourself some goals. And
Right.
I think within the first 30 days, you're generally looking and saying, okay, where's something small I can affect, right? So, and then at 60 days, you have that planning of how to do it. And then within 60 to 90 days, you're trying to push that little thing you're trying to affect out there. So at 90 days is where I think you really start to become effective and be able, and that's when you have to gain the trust of everyone around you too. Right?
Yeah.
Like you're never going to
Yeah.
be effective if you don't
Exactly.
gain trust from
That's
your
true.
boss and the senior leaders and the people below you.
Yeah. I think that's right. I did this thing one time where I joined some company. I had gotten tired of going through the process of meeting all 300 people on the team, on the tech team. So I said, you know what, this time I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to let it happen naturally. And I can tell you, it felt like I was so much more effective because I didn't do those coffees and lunches. I mean, I did a few here and there, with my team, but generally I met everybody in the meetings about the work. And we would just like, I would meet people for the first, like the head of the BI team for the first time. And we would just talk about the work. And I felt like that was a better approach for me personally than like meeting people and being like, where are you from? What's your history? Like, I felt like personal history stuff can come later. I'm like, these people will also appreciate it more if we talk more about the work. There were some people who are like, oh, Bobby, I'm not getting to know you enough and stuff. And for those people, I think it's fine to carve out time. But generally now I've adopted this thing of like, let's bond over the work, let's bond over the stuff that you're having problems with. Let me help you solve those, and we'll get to know each other like organically over time or whatever.
I think that's kind of my thought. Like when I say meet people, I don't think I'm talking, hey, where are you from? I'm talking, hey, this is what I'm bringing to the table. What do you need from me? How can I help you type conversations? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I just think it's more now when I look at people under me, it's more, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to make your life miserable. And tell me what you want. Like I'm a big believer as a leader. People leave companies. It happens all the time. If you want to work at AWS, right? If that's your goal in life, tell me so I can understand what I need to do to help you get there, right? And I don't want you to leave, but if that's your goal, you're probably going to leave eventually. So if I can help get you there, I'm getting the benefit of you learning and working for us anyway, as you start to move that direction. So I think it's just, I tell everyone, I never want you to leave, especially if you're good, but I also know, like, you have to go and do the things you want to do. And I want to understand where people want to be in 5 years, especially those directly under me, because we all have, like, hopefully we all have some motivation and some goal that's out there for, 5 years from now.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, exiting people has always been one of the most difficult parts of the job of a CTO or VP. And I have slowly grown to appreciate my own career. When you start off, you're like, it's a horrible, terrible thing, of course, and it probably mostly is so. But as I've gotten more and more, along the lines of my career, I feel like if you can truly help them after the exit, there are a lot of benefits to everybody involved in a situation like that. And so many people have come back to me later and been like, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. I've gone to this new place. I've thrived over there, and they were ultimately benefited, happy with it. But, when it's first happening, when you're first doing like a riff or something, and it's a large riff, like 50% of the team, 30% of the team, somewhere in that range. It's difficult for first time leaders to sometimes handle that. What are some like tips you can give to our audience about managing through a riff? Like, what are a few things that you felt, I know we had to do this stuff together. Like, how do you handle something like that, in the best way?
So I think when it comes to a riff, something I had to do was, even though it's personal, right, and you have built bonds with people, you have to kind of, during the decision process of like, who are you going to riff, you have to take that and put it aside, right? And it sucks. Like, there's no other way to say it. It sucks that you have to look at people and say, here's the people I've had. I've been asked to shrink to this many. You don't want to get rid of anyone, but you've been told to do it. So for me personally, I remove myself, my personal feelings from the process the best I can, and look overall at, who are the best people to keep, because you have to keep the best that you can. And then I think when you get ready to actually do the riff is Remind people it's not their fault, right? That you're not being let go because of something you did wrong. And because it'll often be felt like it's their fault they're being laid off. It's their fault they're getting
Right.
moved, right? But it's not. It's just business, right? No one loves
Right.
to hear that, oh, it's just business, but that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And reminding them it's not your fault. Make sure, one thing I did is make sure everyone knew, hey, you have my LinkedIn. I will do an introduction to anyone you want me to. I I will do a recommendation. I won't do a LinkedIn recommendation because I don't feel like, hey, if I write one here, I got to write one here, I got to write one here. But I will do a recommendation and an
Right.
intro for anybody. Um, and then beyond the riff, when you just have to let people go, um, I often say it's like a relationship. Sometimes they come to an end, right? And it's often for the good of both sides. I've seen people that we've let go off to a new company and flourish, right? It was the environment, it changed. They have a different aspect, a different thing they're working on, and they're
Mm-hmm.
better off for it. And, you know, the company itself became better off for it. So I think
Yeah.
when riffs and just like exiting people in general, it's, sometimes it is the person's fault and you can't do anything about that. That's the, hey, you're just not
Yeah.
doing what you should. But when it's a riff, you know, I think it's always telling and reminding people what's going on. It's not your fault, right? This isn't something you've done that's making you not have a job tomorrow. This is something that the business has to do for the survival of the business. And like, it is what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not your fault. That's all I think the biggest thing to say is
Mm-hmm.
reminding them. And I can tell
Yeah.
you, it absolutely, I will go back and say it was, for me, when I had to do a riff, it was the worst time of my career.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Those can be hard times for sure. The impact you're having on everybody, and yeah, it's tough psychologically. I actually wrote something about that in Technocratic. I've got a article up about how to handle a big riff. It's not easy for sure. Now the flip side of that is like growth and scaling, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So okay, you've got this team. Maybe it's 50 or 60 developers and engineers, what have you, and your boss comes in and says, we're doing great. You got to double that in the next year or something like that. What should a VP or CTO kind of think about? What are the main considerations to pull that off, like pull off scaling a team, even doubling it in a 6 to 8 month, 12-month period, whatever? Um, because hiring people is just the first step almost. That's the easy part, is to just cast a net, find some people and stuff. Hard part is actually just getting everybody to perform right and perform really well. What are some of the big takeaways from your perspective, like that you had from having to do that in the past?
um, yeah, I think one, we say hiring's easy. I don't know that it's really that easy. I think one thing when you're asked to double the size, um, it's easy to lower your standards, right? Because you have this massive
Yeah,
thing in front of you. So it's easy to lower that standard and say, well, I have to get 40 people on board. How am I going to do that? No, we interview 10 people and hire one at our standards. So how am I expected to go that? So lowering your standards, number one, is to me the biggest mistake, right?
right.
I think once you start getting folks on board, it's it's a slow process. Um, you know, you can say, "Oh, I can go create new teams," um, but in the beginning, there's no team that like you have one or two people starting. I found in the past integrating folks onto existing teams is the quickest way to get someone up to speed. Um,
Yeah,
if you're hiring 40 over a year, so you know again, you can't have teams of 50 or teams of 12. That's too large. So I think you have to start breaking them apart and integrating. It sucks to rip a
yeah,
team apart that's been kind of performing, But if you're bringing in that many people, sometimes it's better to have 3 that have been here and 3 that are new. And that team's going to start ramp up a lot faster than here's a team of 6 that just all new. And I think that's the big one. And I think, just like anything, you have to have the processes in place to give the buddies, the mentors, I don't know how to do something, question asking, right? Whether
do you put the process in place? Do you have to think through the process and then get everybody kind of thrown in there, or do you just bring everybody in and then figure out the process as you go along?
I think you have to have the process before you start the hiring, because just the hire.
A lot of companies don't; they just hire and slot them in.
But if you don't, then you're kind of playing it by ear. Like I think back to when I was tasked with that, and that was probably one of the mistakes, was not having that process. We kind of had a somewhat of an idea what we were going to do, but we didn't have it completely planned out. And so we were kind of planning as we went, which means there were times where things weren't as good as they could have been, where if we'd taken a week or two to think about, okay, we want week 1 to look like this, 2 to look like that, 3 to look like that, it probably would have made the process much easier. Now, we managed to get things working the way we needed to, but I think the other process and plan that has to be put in place is interviewing 40 people takes a lot of people hours. Right. And having that schedule and who's doing what all set up so that there's that process in place to get those people through the interview process. Right. And I'm not talking, the Google 6 interview process. I'm talking the 3 interview process. Right. It's still a lot of work and a lot of man hours and everyone involved to do that.
Yeah. What, you said this earlier, that hiring is difficult. In our business of engineering, and the world is packed full of engineers, you get computer science is the number 1 major in every college pretty much in the last 10 years. Why is hiring so difficult in your opinion?
To me, hiring is difficult. Most of the time, it's not an aptitude thing. It's are they a fit? Are they a fit for the current group? Will they kind of fit in? I think aptitude, right? Aptitude is one thing that's testable. We can do that. Book answers, I think giving coding tests I'm not a big fan of the coding test. I'm a big fan of the pair programming with someone in the beginning during the interview process on a real world problem, right? Something they may see, not here's a leak code, go, reverse a binary tree. And I think pair programming lets you figure out how a person thinks, lets you test their aptitude a bit, right, across your stack. And then I think the next step after they pass that is always have the team they're going to work with do an interview as well, because they're the ones who are going to say, yeah, Norm, they may have been great in React, but when we talk to them, I don't think any of us are ever going to get along with this person. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing.
What do you, I think you're spot on. Yeah. But let's dig deeper into like one thing you said about fit, right? What does fit mean to you?
Fit to me means they've been given an explanation of kind of the company culture, or what I will even say the engineering culture, right? There's always a company culture, but everywhere I've been, there's also an engineering culture, right? Yeah. And they understand, what it's like to work in that organization. And a prime example to me is when you're in an organization where everyone's super collaborative, right? And now you're in this interview with what I'm going to call the solo rock star who tells you, he does everything by himself. He's probably not going to be the fit you're looking for. He might be a 10x engineer, but in the end, he's probably going to piss off all of your other engineers, right? Because the organization is very cultural, like very much collaborative and sharing knowledge and doing things together, right? And so I think when I think of fit, that's what I'm thinking. Do they fit with the organization and the way the organization operates today, right? Are they coming in, to participate in the current organization, or are they coming in to create their own organization? Right. And I
That's
think
another good
that's
one.
what I think about fit.
Yeah, that's good. I think of it as a bunch of different things. It feels like communication is definitely up there at the top. Like, given the existing team and somebody coming in new, is their communication style the right one for this team that they're coming into? Maybe being quiet is completely okay in this team. They already have a couple loud talkers or whatever. Um, or in addition to, I think, communication, number two for me is like attitude. It's like, all right, again, you have a certain team. If there are a bunch of can-do people on that team already, and you just need a steady person who's going to come in, do their job, and go away, that's one thing. Or if you need somebody who's going to go the extra mile, they're the type of person who like picks up other people's tasks, just gets everything done. So maybe you need somebody like that. So there's definitely like kind of a bunch of different things like that that make it so difficult. Whereas I think in other kinds of roles, when you're hiring for like sales or marketing or something like that, it doesn't seem like you need that deep. Of course, you're not talking to people who have deep technical skills as much as you are in engineering. So I feel like in engineering, it's more rare to find a person who has the technical skills and has the fit capability part of it. And it's just a natural, more uphill battle for VPs and CTOs because of that reason. There's not a ton of super gregarious engineers running around. Just ask me and Mishka. There's a ton of salespeople like that, but there's not a lot of engineers. So it's like, I find that if you can get somebody willing to get out of their box, like they have really good aptitude, like you said, but they're willing to learn the rest of it in quotes or whatever, they can become superstars because you teach them to communicate really well. They'll be crushing it in meetings and presentations. You teach them how to collaborate across departments to become amazing relationship people. That's like the unicorn engineer who can do stuff like that. Okay, really interesting. I'm looking at the time and I'm being cognizant of it. So we'll switch gears here a little bit, Norm, and talk a little bit about what's been going on in the world of AI. And obviously, it's changing things already in product and engineering. As you look at the landscape and with all the tools I'm sure you've been playing with and all the projects you've been doing, like where do you see next year, 2025, where do you see AI going as far as its transformative impact onto product and engineering?
Yeah, so for me, I think as AI gets better, there's lots of naysayers out there, right? AI will never write code. AI is never going to be able to write code good enough. I might be a little contrarian to that. I think the more you use it, the more you kind of analyze what it's doing, the more you start seeing that it's getting better and better and better. And it's like it's very exponential. It's not linear, right? It's getting better exponentially better. I think people will often look at it and say it's not writing code the way I can write code. Well, I don't write code like you write code either, right? I have my own personal style. I know Mishka and I were talking before this about I started playing with Windsurfer from Codium, right? And it is amazing. It's cursor AI. It's just a different flavor, but it is night and day to a year ago. Right, a year ago, things didn't create files for you. They didn't do create command line commands for you. Now it's just, hey, tell me why this error is happening on this import. Oh, you're missing the import. Here, let me write the command line for you. Great, thanks. You want me to execute it? Sure. Like all of it's just a conversation now. Now, do you have to go back and make sure the code's good and read it? Sure. That's going to be the skill set of the future is understanding the domain you're working in so that you understand the code within the domain, right? It's not going to be, can I write authentication code? It's going to be, is the authentication and authorization code, according to how we need to do it? Not so much, how do I write? I was telling Mishka, I spent the weekend and just said, hey, I want an app that is going to use Supabase for authorization, and the Postgres database is Supabase, and here's kind of the objects I'm going to want in the database. And it scaffolded it all out. It wrote all the authentication, authorization code for me. I didn't do anything. And I'm like, that is and it was a 30-minute time period. I think some of the stuff, I think it's called product chat. I think where we start to see benefits is when we can take product requirements and have them get processed through something to produce the code, right? To look at requirements, and requirements are written in such a way that they can take a requirement and instantly feed it into a system, right? And get some sort of code out of it. I was having a conversation with my son, who's actually a computer guy, scientist up in DC, but he has my 2 young granddaughters, and we were talking about the future of computer science. And for me, I said, I don't know that I could suggest computer science as a skill to go. I'd go get a good English major and know how to write prompts. Like that's what I would, that's the future, is being able to write prompts. But also, as we get more into the agents, I think that's where you're going to see the fundamental changes. Is moving from ChatGPT into agents that have workflows that are actually executing things using AI and using the LLMs, right? That's the future. And I don't think we're that far away.
Yeah, we're not. It feels like, to me, that in another couple of years, I don't think we're going to be hiring that many junior engineers in the world. I think that's going to be a difficult job it won't exist, as much anymore. I think maybe computer science changes and sticks around, but adjusts itself to like factor in AI way more, now maybe there is a prompt engineering class literally in colleges, maybe. Maybe there's a class about Gen AI, maybe there's a, but for sure, this is a tool that we're going to be using forever now in software engineering. And whoever doesn't use the tool is just going to be left behind. That's so clear and obvious. The people who are really good at using the tool, it's kind of like, remember when like GitHub took off? Git just took off. You remember doing stuff in CVS back in the day?
CVS or even old TFS.
Yeah, exactly. And then when Git came out, it was like, God, this is so much faster, easier, better. Then on top of that, GitHub, the company, got created, and that made your life easier. It's like that on like steroids, AI, and so you just got to be able to use it really well and know what to ask it in the right way at the right time, blah, blah, blah. And it changes your whole life as a software engineer. I think it changes the lives of product people too. I don't know what you think about that, but I think like, okay, well, if right now, think about this, right? You have AI startups that are offering AI agents that can go and call customers and have sales discussions with them. Right. Or support discussions with them. I'm like, okay, well, there's going to be AI for product people that just does discovery work with your customer advisory board or something, Right. I think it's more frequently applicable to engineering right now, but what do you think about its impact on product?
I think for product, like you said, I think there's going to be the day where it is doing some of that customer surveys, looking out. But I think even today, it's quick to figure out what your competitor's doing, right? Like you don't even have to worry about your customers.
Yeah.
You ask it, what are your
help you create a roadmap? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, it's a miss if they're not already using it to say, hey, we're, you can ask design questions, is green or red a better button cutter to take an action, right? Now, most people know that answer, but junior folks might not know, right?
Yeah.
And I think the next step is, writing PRDs, writing that, that product fact, right? That everyone kind of thinks you want written before you start. Like that's going to become easier because you're going to be able to simply say, this is kind of my requirements. Can you write me a PRD? Go find some stats that support this. And off it goes and it comes back and it's going to, and, we're getting better at telling it to tell me the resource you pulled it from, right? Like Perplexity to me is that place if you're looking for resources and make sure, you have the reference, you go to Perplexity to do your chat, right? Because it's going to give you some of that. But I think there is a world where all of that is possible already. And it's like you said, it's understanding how to ask the question properly to get the answer you're after.
So. Yeah, exactly. One place where I'm not sure about its impact yet is cloud ops. Well, it's two places, cloud ops and security. I feel like both are such like investigation focused roles. And it's the world of, especially in security, you're always investigating one problem or another. It seems like it will, of course, change the security world too, but like maybe not as fast as software engineering. What do you guys think?
For me, the security side, I think we often confuse machine learning with AI, right? And I think of security sides a lot of machine learning, anomaly detection, right? Versus straight kind of, today everyone uses AI to mean kind of chat GPT, right? That's kind of a blanket or prompting. I think from the security world, it comes in of just the sheer amount of documentation out there that can now just be queried really fast with really generic English questions, right? I think that is its forte at the moment. And to like that for me, the security wise, hey, I'm seeing this. Can you tell me about this? Right. And just being able to quickly find it. Sure, we can go to Google and go through the first 10 advertisements for the latest and greatest SOC or MSP that's offering whatever they're offering. Or we can just go to ChatGPT or, Claude and ask, hey, this is what we're seeing. Can you explain to me what's going on? And you can get those answers, right?
Yeah.
Or there's an anomaly happen, and it instantly gives you the readout, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Plus with agents, I mean, agents, security agents, DevOps agents, I'm sure there'll be breakthroughs over there where they can do some of the work that humans do right now. Mishka, any thoughts on that, on the security side of things?
Yeah, I mean, really briefly, my thought is AI could be it could be used to eliminate the root cause of your security problems. Right. So it's, code OWASP top 10 kind of things. It could be used to eliminate that kind of thing. For misconfigurations in cloud ops, it could be used to eliminate those kinds of things. So that's where I see the real value and future in.
Isn't that what like Amazon Q is trying to do? Like being able to use it within, AWS today and use Q to examine your current, infrastructure within AWS and get feedback. I believe that's pretty much what Q has kind of been designed to do within the AWS world.
Yeah. Get to the point where you don't need, you need less of a security team because there's less security input being there's less security issue input happening, because your agents are doing a better job than humans are.
Yep.
Yeah. Using AI to keep your infrastructure locked down. Already a thing, obviously, already was a thing for several years, many years, I think, especially at the high end kind of level. And that stuff, the AI tools to keep stuff locked down just gets better and better. Right. I think security people make more and more use of it. But then the other side of it, is the criminals out there continuing to use AI to do better and better exploits. So there, who knows? It's like the wars will continue kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting how it impacts like security and cloud ops and things like that too. outside of just product engineering. Switching gears here towards the tail end of our conversation, back to sort of more on the professional development side. Norm, as you've gone up through your career, in your career trajectory, as you've gone up the ladder, what can you share in terms of tips that, let's say you're talking to a director of engineering who's trying to become a VP of engineering. What skills do they need to make that jump in your view?
Sure. I think when you are thinking the jump like from a director into more of a maybe a senior leadership role, I think for me, the biggest skill that I was mentored on basically was the ability to communicate with other senior leaders in
Right.
non-technical terms, right?
Right.
Being able to explain what's going on and what's being built or what the priorities are without getting into engineering jargon. I think that was the thing that my mentors taught me most. And I think the other one is just understanding you can't do everything, and being able to strategically say no, right? Because you have to be very tactful with the no's, because you can't do everything. Your teams can't do everything being asked. So you have to be able to say no with a great explanation of why it's not possible at this moment, right? And possible sometime, but not right now, this second. We're already tapped out. So that's the first one. I think the second thing I would say is, and it's going to be really horrible, is recognize it's lonely at the top, right? That, when you kind of get into that role, you find that a lot of times you're by yourself now, right? You're lonely, and it's lonely, right? And so to break out of that is just to remember where you came from, remember what it was like, and remember that it's okay to go have conversations with the people 3 levels down, 2 levels down. There's nothing wrong with having conversations. And that's how you break that loneliness at the top, in my mind.
Yeah. That's a great tip on the loneliness thing, and it's so true. One thing that I found in my own personal journey was that when you're just like starting off as a software developer and getting into it, and then you're continuing to do hands-on work, and you're kind of increasing your stature. A lot of what your whole focus is on is whether like a thing is almost scientifically doable or not. Excuse me. Whether something is like really doable or not. Like you're always getting these jobs, basically job requests. Like, all right, you got to do this now. We got to build a new login or something in like 30 days, or we got to deprecate the database in 5 hours, or we got to do something. And you're always in this mindset of like, can I do it? Can I not do it? Can my team do it or not do it? Are we going to pull this off or not? And then when you get into more executive level roles, it's not just about that anymore. And it feels like it's more about like you have a bunch of trade-offs that you have to make, right? And it's just managing those trade-offs and figuring out the risk and like what appetite of risk you're going to accept and all that. And the people I've noticed who are really good at this, at leading and managing at the highest level, they get out of the engineering mindset they had before of like doable, not doable, binary, yes, no shit. And they go into the vague sort of gray area of trade-offs and risk management. And, and it's even stuff like, it's incredible how when you go from just being a pure engineer to being an executive, you start to realize how important it is to just the simple act of staying positive in the face of problems. When you're an individual contributor developer, all you deal with is problems every day. You're mostly kind of like pessimistic almost. And then you get into executive leadership and now you have to be positive for the sake of everybody else on your team. So there's all these like little nuances that directors of engineering who are trying to make the leap you gotta. It's a different ball game. It's not the same
Absolutely.
role.
Even in the worst of times, if you're not staying positive, then guess what? Everyone below you is also,
Everybody
I
freaks
always say
out.
everyone
Yeah,
below you is a reflection of yourself, right? If
right,
you're negative, they're going to be negative.
right,
And I often say, a problem happens. It's not, yeah, we want to understand why it happened, but what we really want to do is learn how not to have it happen again. Right.
right.
And that's kind of that positivity. Don't get me wrong. There's times I'm sure even in your career, you go behind closed doors and you turn really negative with the whiteboard. Right. But it's behind closed doors. I think
Right.
it is that piece that people, I'm a very hands-on leader. So for me, what's really hard is remembering that sometimes I have to push the keyboard away because that's not my major focus anymore of writing code.
Right,
The major
exactly.
focus
Well said.
is to make
Hmm.
sure the business is that we're building the things the business needs. And we're doing, I think ROI, I know you preached it to us a lot, was, just don't build things. Make sure there's a reason to be building something. Right. So, and I think that's that
Yeah,
piece
absolutely.
where you're not looking at, is it
Yeah,
feasible from a infrastructure, but is it also feasible from a monetary point of view, like revenue point of view?
right.
So,
Yeah, exactly. The last thing I'll say on that is, I don't know what you think about this, but I feel like a lot of middle managers want the C-suite kind of handed to them, and they don't want to take the risk of they don't want to take the risk of failing. They just feel like they want to do comfortable things and still be promoted. And I know for people like me, for people like you, for people like Mishka, like there were points in our career where we were like, I'm going to take this big risk and I'm going to pull this whole thing off, and company's going to succeed, I'm going to succeed. And I feel like the better executives are those types of people, rather than just sitting around being like, well, I did my hours, I did my projects. Well, what are you going to give me now? It's easy to do easy projects. Ask Mishka, like, hey, solve these incredibly difficult security issues that are going on, right? And not a lot of people want to stand in the firing squad of that. And I think we need more risk takers who in product and engineering, and those people typically, I think, fare better at the executive ranks.
well, I wholeheartedly agree. I would say my whole career is built on doing the things others were afraid to do. Right.
Yeah,
Going out
absolutely,
on a
Norm.
limb and saying, you know
Yeah,
what, it's going to be hard. There's a chance I'm going to fail. Right. Sure, this is a hard thing. Um, but if we don't do it, if you don't take those risks, um, there's a lot of reasons people stop at senior engineer.
right.
Right. And that's one of them is you stop wanting to take that risk and take on that
Exactly.
hard project where there
Yeah,
is a chance of failure. Right.
yeah,
Um, but when you take them on and you keep succeeding, you will find yourself going through the ranks at the proper time. Right.
yeah,
So
yeah. Well said, Norm. Okay, I think we're at the end of our time. It was a pleasure talking with you today.
absolutely, Bobby, anytime. I absolutely um I will say I learned a lot during the time we spent together. And I
Me too.
one thing I have written here is, you know, if you want to succeed in your career, find great mentors. And
Yeah, that's big.
even when you left that company, keep them on as a mentor. Don't just say
Yeah,
I've left a company. So that would be
right.
my advice to anyone starting out. Find the right mentor, not a coach. A
That's
coach
huge.
teaches you how to bat. A mentor challenges you to tweak how you're batting, right? And
It's totally
they
true.
challenge you. So don't find a coach.
Yep.
Go find great mentors. So
Yeah, Norm, I always learn so much listening to you, man. And I'm sure our listeners will have taken a lot from this discussion. So thank you to everybody for joining. And I'll see you next time on the Technocratic podcast. In the meantime, keep the shark swimming.